Good evening and welcome to a new episode of our program, The Daily Debates. Wednesday evening, I'm Yasmin Bakir. I'd like to first, on behalf of myself and Nile TV International, wish all Muslims around the world a very happy feast, Eid al-Fitr or Lesser Bayram, as you may call it. And we do hope that despite these very harsh circumstances that the whole world is going through with regard to the COVID-19 pandemic, that hopefully things will be at a much more safer haven, and that we would be expecting more tourists here in Egypt after this feast. And that's exactly what we'll be talking this evening about. The tourism industry in Egypt, it's rebound, what is expected to take place in terms of bookings during or after Eid al-Fitr. Now, Egypt and Russia have been agreeing to resume their flights very soon, specifically at the Red Sea resorts of Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh. We're expecting around 1 million Russian tourists to be pouring into Egypt during 2021. That's also a good gateway to other destinations such as Ukraine, Turkmenistan, there is Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, and as well as Uzbekistan. So that's going to be also another gateway to tourism to pour into Egypt. Now, despite the precautionary measures and Egypt being on high alert with regard to the coronavirus, a lot of destinations are ready to hold tourists in this regard. We've also been seeing a lot of renovations going on in different museums. Recently, there was the Golden Parade that took place as well at the Egyptian, now where they've been laid at the Egyptian Civilization Museum. So we have a very interesting guest, and he's going to be shedding all this with us and how he sees tourism industry in Egypt reviving recently. I'm very much delighted to have joining me Mr. Tarik Al-Sharif. He's a tourism and hospitality expert. Thank you for joining us and happy feast.
Thank you very much. Eid Mubarak to you and your audience. Thank you for having me.
Mr. Tarik, we're going to be very interested to know more from you about the tourism industry here in Egypt, but if you would allow us to first view this report. And inbound tourism to Egypt increases each month, and that's according to the ministry information. Let's take a look.
Minister of Tourism and Antiquities Khalid Al-Anani said that there is a monthly increase in the rate of inbound tourism, indicating restored confidence in the country as a safe tourist destination. Anani said that we have now reached 40% of the numbers for the same period before the coronavirus outbreak, which is a good rate. He explained that the main destinations for inbound tourism to Egypt are Sharm el-Sheikh, followed by Hurghada and Marsa Alam. Egypt's main markets for tourism are Eastern Europe and Western Europe, and the Arab countries remain closed, he said, with Eastern Europe making up over 80% of the total foreign tourists. He said that the recent high-publicized transfer of royal mummies served to demonstrate the abilities of the Egyptian state to dazzle the world, adding that this event was primarily done to promote tourism. The minister also enumerated the features of the tourism plan as part of the 2030 strategy, with the most prominent to encourage investments and the investment climate and increase the competitiveness of Egyptian tourism, not only in price, but also services such as roads, hospitals, and promotions.
Welcome back again as you're watching us here on The Daily Debate. And once again, I'd like to welcome my guest in the studio, Mr. Tarik Al-Sharif, tourism and hospitality expert. Thank you once again, Mr. Tarik. Now, as we've seen in this report, there's a lot of efforts that have been done and are ongoing between whether it's the Ministry of Antiquities or in cooperation with the Ministry of Tourism to host tourists and to also add more different attractions to tourists. How do you, first of all, see the tourism industry in Egypt today?
Well, as we always have been saying that, I mean, tourism in Egypt may get sick a little bit, but never dies. The fact that Egypt is a hot destination and it is the most demanded destination in the world for tourism, for tourists from all over the world. I mean, for Egypt, like in every other country in the past year, been affected dramatically by the COVID-19, and that's not only Egypt, but all the world. Egypt has done a lot of efforts, as we can see, in the past year, and most recently as well, to attract tourism to come back. I think the issue here is that Egypt will always be on the map. There's people waiting out there to come and visit us. And I think we are ready. As soon as flights and aviation comes back, we'll be ready to receive them.
Now, usually in feasts, this is a good opportunity to attract tourism, and we're especially speaking of local tourism. I'm not sure if inbound tourism means the same thing. Maybe you can help explain how usually, despite the fact that, I mean, apart from having tourism or foreign tourists come into Egypt, the local tourism is also working very well because we are 100 million and there's so many destinations and so many different sites that people can go and visit to. So how has that been sort of, I won't say compensating, but on the other hand, balancing the tourism industry, especially during its crucial time last year and in the beginning of this year? Right.
Well, with the fact that a year ago flights has stopped and people stopped flying because of the COVID-19, still we are receiving internally, or you want to call it local tourism or domestic tourism, is the Egyptians or the people who lives in the country. As you said, there's a lot of destination, different attraction that satisfies different tastes. So there's beach resorts, there's beach destinations, there's even touristic destinations that people would like to go to. And I think the domestic tourism or travel has helped, at least I would say, maintaining a little bit of a minimum balance, and at least hotels and tourism can pay the bill. In the past year. So it has been helpful. The thing is that it's not year-round, it's seasonal, so it comes into like Easter, it comes into like New Year or Eid, like we are heading into Eid al-Fitr. So it helped, but it was not sufficient, I may say. But it is different than the inbound. Inbound tourism is always identified by people coming from abroad or from outside the country. And that we all know that is very minimal for the time being. For the time being.
Now, what do you think of the government measures that are being undertaken concerning the COVID-19 precautionary measures, especially as we have a long holiday? And although the government has curfewed 9 p.m. closure to several restaurants and cafes and so forth, public beaches, but still the private beaches and hotels and resorts are still ongoing. How is that being managed during this period?
Right. Well, I appreciate very much and value the efforts that the government has taken, especially that tourism is also an related to safety and security. And safety and security is not only about like security from police point or military, but it's also health-wise. So the country has taken very good measures. It was able to balance between the economy and keeping things going on and the measures of being healthy. The measures that we have taken here is very good because also there is some restriction on who can enter the country. It's not restricted, but it is certain measures that people have to take care of. So we are trying to keep the inside safe and healthy. In the meantime, we are not closing for tourism.
But then again, Mr. Tarik, that's a social responsibility.
Right.
So again, what is the social responsibility for people and to ensure that they do follow the precautionary measures? Here in Egypt, we do know that it's been a bit difficult. It's been very much difficult, especially when you're talking. I mean, I can't even say anymore that you're talking to a certain sector of the society. It's just everywhere. People, I don't know, are they bored, tired of being cautious for so long? They believe they're going to be safe regardless. They believe it is so far away from them to contract the virus. I don't know what the idea is, but there seems to be still social responsibility.
Of course. I mean, it's a very sensitive topic because everybody is pointing to everybody that they are not taking measures, but you know, in fact, that everybody is not taking it seriously. There is no certain way to protect yourself from the virus except taking the basic precautions, wearing the mask, keeping social distance, you know, not really going into crowded people as we see in the streets. I think that the measures that the government has taken for closing at 9 p.m. is very good. even it's a bit harsh. People think it's a bit harsh. I think it's right because we just tend to forget. We are very social people. We love to be together.
Maybe they believe that the virus is going to be put asleep after 9 p.m. So it's okay
yeah,
to
exactly.
overcrowd before 9 p.m.
Exactly. And you know, the people would, I know people, I'm thinking, no, inshallah, nothing is going to happen. It's like, yes, inshallah, nothing is going to happen, but you have to take the precautions.
You still be socially responsible. That's the thing. That's why I was very cautious to ask this question in specific. Now, you've spoken about the fact that it's important to focus on the foreign tourism to Egypt, but I want to ask you whether it's because the summer holidays are also coming in, so Egypt is always a very popular destination. Let's talk about the difference from your perspective and your experience. Are the tourism that is coming from the Middle East very much different than that's coming from the Western countries in terms of interests, destinations and attractions that they would want to visit and see?
Yeah, well, certainly, yeah. When the Middle Eastern tourism that the likes of like the Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, Kuwait and so on, they have different interests. They are not here for antiquities. I mean, like, you know, we very rarely see a Saudi tourist, for instance, and I'm not picking on a specific nationality, that they want to go to the pyramids. But you will definitely see people from Europe or Eastern Europe. They are here to specifically come and see the monuments, the temples, the new museum. Some of others would rather go to beaches because it's too cold wherever they come from. So of course the requirements and the needs for different destination varies, and thanks God Egypt has it all to offer to them.
But the thing is that because the country is so big and there's so much you can do, here comes the renovation or the thinking out of the box strategy of how do I fulfill a trip visit by certain people coming in at a very short time. Let's say most people would come in for 5 days, a week, 10 days maximum. But the time period, if it's not being used very wisely, especially that the locations are very far away from each other, how do you put together a schedule? Is it an individual schedule? Is it by country schedule? Is it according to the tourism company? How is it working nowadays? You tell us more what's happening in the kitchen.
Well, normally what happens, Egypt sells out via travel agencies and their partner tour operators in Europe or in the world. They put out certain packages or certain programs. So you can certainly not cover Egypt in 5 days, so that's why they pick certain areas. So there's a package like for Luxor and Aswan with a Nile cruise. So then you're focusing on that area. Maybe on the way you may make one stop in Cairo. If you're flying to Cairo, you do a quick overday program to the Sphinx and the pyramids, and that's it. Some others would have a classical tour in Cairo, and they will not go to Luxor and Aswan. So you have different programs that are sold, and they are priced that way. And then you put that on the menu, like the a la carte. You put that out for the tourists there, and then they pick the one they want. So some others would, you know, prefer to come and stay in Hurghada, Marsa Alam, or in Sharm el-Sheikh just for the beach, just get the suntan and enjoy their time for 5 days, and then they fly back. So it depends very much. That's why the variety of programs that we offer to the world is different, and people can pick from whatever they want.
Now, let me go back again to the local tourism versus the international tourism. And here I'm talking about that the taste of local tourism has changed. During the past very few years, we started seeing Egyptians being more interested into going to other places in Sinai, such as Dahab or camping on Nuweiba, which were destinations that would highly be picked by foreigners. We're seeing now more Egyptians interested to go back and check out their museums. You know, the Egyptian civilization museums after the Golden Parade and the mummies were shifted there. We've seen an increased number of local citizens wanting to go and look into that. So can we say that the generation here in Egypt has changed and that people are looking more into staying in Egypt and discovering it rather than going to trips outside? I'm talking about the local tourism here.
Right. Well, certainly the parade that has taken place a few weeks ago for the mummies has actually enticed more Egyptians into looking into that. So I personally have been to one of these museums, and I wanted to see what is that? Who is these kings and queens? I cannot say that there is change in the mindset, but it is something that helped promoting also internal and domestic travel. So even though that the parade was meant to promote tourism in Egypt, and it was done on and broadcasted on several international channels, but it has also had an impact on the Egyptians to go and see. There is kids, youngsters who want to see because they study that at school. So they thought that, Daddy, please take me there. I want to see the mummies. I want to see King Tut or Queen Nefertari, and so on. So there is more demand, there is change, but also because there's also limitation on traveling outside the country. So people wanted to enjoy their time. So they start looking into different new things.
Now, speaking of demand, is it true that in the upcoming short period, the Arab countries would be remaining closed to visit Egypt versus the Western Europe and Eastern Europe? Or are there changes that will be taking place, more bookings possibly coming in from the Arab countries, especially in light of this pandemic situation?
Right. Well, I think, the pandemic is still having an impact. However, I've read in the news a couple of days ago that, for instance, Saudi Arabia is opening on the 17th of May, that's in a few days, for certain criteria to travel abroad from Saudi Arabia. And they have set destinations where they can fly to. And out of these destinations, there's 3 destinations in Egypt: Cairo, Alexandria, and Sharm el-Sheikh. So that is a positive indication.
And there's the new Alamein as well, which is also more attracting the Arab countries.
Yes, as a new destination, of course, the North Coast is the coming destination, I can say that. There's a lot of government efforts developing construction and, really moving a lot of efforts and media and shedding more light into that area that has been I cannot say ignored, but it has been kept away like a best secret. It is coming back again. And there has been some change in the attitude of Arabic tourism in the past years, where they started looking into beach destinations. That was never the case, I would say, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. It was very classical. They want to stay in Cairo. They want to be on the Nile.
The nightlife in Cairo also was very...
Kind of.
Yeah.
But now you see that, opening a destination from Saudi Arabia to Sharm el-Sheikh or from Kuwait to Sharm el-Sheikh, they do fly. And that makes a lot of sense now because there's a new destination for them, like beaches and enjoyment.
They're fully prepared cities with services, so they do get to do what they want to do.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, we've also been talking about the preparations, and here we need to talk about the hotel's responsibilities, and the ministry is following up on the fact to ensure that hotels do follow precautionary measures, that they're up to the quality standards of cleanness and quality of food and quality of well-trained workers and laborers who had a break for some time due to the pandemic. How well are the resorts and hotels prepared for tourism in the upcoming period, all across Egypt?
Well, I think, generally speaking, hotels are aware that they have actually suffered for a year. Some hotels had to scale down their labor or to close down partially to be able to maintain their expenses. But all hotels are now aware, especially when we hear that the Russians are coming back in full swing, flying to all destinations, Cairo and the resorts. So now they are preparing. It has been a while. Some smart people, some smart hotels have taken that period to renovate hotels and to upgrade the facilities so they are ready when tourism is back. Now, for the labor, yes, there has been some, I would say, slowdown for some time. And now we're bringing that back. A lot of hotels are doing training. They are rehiring and making sure that they are filling in the positions that they have to keep empty for some time to maintain expenses. So I would say, alongside with the government precautions and emphasizing, there has been now, I read about vaccinating, the vaccination for all people who work in hotel and the hospitality industry. So all these are measures that has been taken and being ready to prepare for the comeback of tourism.
Speaking of having the Russian tourists come into Egypt, and we've seen that being agreed clearly between both President Sisi and his counterpart Vladimir Putin during a phone call conversation a couple of days ago, and for that to resume alone, and specifically the Red Sea resorts, we're talking about 1 million Russians flocking into Egypt in 2021.
Right.
How is that going to also again sort of revive the tourism industry in the upcoming period?
Right. Well, it is. If I would put it in a way, it is like someone who's been sick, fainting away, and then you just injected him with some vitamins, and he wakes up. So this is how I present it in my mindset. Tourist is the blood and the oxygen for tourism business. Hotels cannot survive without tourists. And having all the Russian coming back, I mean, we are expecting this summer to be a great summer. At least it will kind of compensate the issues that happened in the last year, especially with the losses of some hotels. So this is a great news, and it's a great effort, and we're very thankful for the government to do that, because it's just like, you know, bringing back life to tourism.
We're speaking about 1 million here, expectations to take place in 2021 versus 3 million Russians who used to visit Egypt previously, and that was allocating around 25% of the income for tourism in Egypt. But we're also seeing other markets. I know right before the pandemic there was the Indian tourism into Egypt and the Chinese, and there was more people from Asia coming and discovering Egypt, which is very different in nature than in Eastern and Western Europe. And apart from that, we're seeing also destinations like Ukraine, Belarus, we're seeing Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan and so forth. Are these different varieties possibly also going to need more better tailored programs for them, or do they all fall under the same interest of foreign tourists who would be number one interested in antiquities, full stop?
Right. Well, to start with, I mean, the Russian business is very much beach resorts, beach business. So they come here
to the Red Sea.
Red Sea, being Hurghada, Sharm el-Sheikh, Marsa Alam, and all the surrounding areas. And so I would say it's a good 90% of the Russian business, if not all, would be only for beaches. However, for the Indian market and the Russian, it is a little bit different, because, I mean, the Chinese, sorry, I said the Indian and the Chinese.
And the Chinese. The Asian.
The Chinese, when they started, just before the pandemic, they were more interested into antiquities. China is a country of a civilization, and they are interested to come and see the civilization of the Egyptians. So that is more into that area. Indians, we've seen a surge in the Indian business. It was coming more into events and conferences and incentive groups. But right now, the challenge or the limit would also be with the aviation industry, because it's not just we open hotels and then tourism or tourists start flocking in, and it's how they are going to come in. So aviation industry still has its own restriction as well on related to pandemic and who is vaccinated, who is not. And especially now, of course, when we hear about the Indian variation of the COVID-19, that's a little bit scary.
Yes, and then we're going to talk about packages and aviation in a while. We're going to be talking about conference tourism, because that's something that was blooming very well in Egypt right before the pandemic.
Correct.
If you'd allow us to go to this second report, and tourism workers hailed the Egyptian flights resumption to Egypt.
The decision to resume tourist flights to Egypt has been praised by many officials and workers in the tourism sector after a long hiatus that lasted for 6 years. They said that the resumption of the Russian flights will compensate the losses the sector experienced, especially after the global repercussions witnessed due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The Ministry of Health continues the vaccination of workers in the tourism sector aiming to secure tourist destinations and reassure foreign delegations coming to the Red Sea as well as all tourist facilities. In a phone call, President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and Russia's President Vladimir Putin agreed on resuming all flights between the two countries' airports, including to the resorts of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada. President el-Sisi welcomed the step, hoping it pushes forward to further advance bilateral relations between the two countries. Presidential spokesman Bassem Radi said that during the call, the Russian president affirmed his country's keenness to enhance cooperation, praising Egypt's achievements in the fields of economic and social development, besides the establishment of mega-national projects. Putin added that Russia is counting on Egypt's pivotal role in stabilizing its entire regional environment. The executive director of the Russian Association of Tour Operators revealed the TASS Russian tour operators plans to launch charter flights to the Egyptian resorts in 7 to 14 days after air services resume. In remarks to the Russian news agency, they said charter flights to the resorts of Sharm el-Sheikh and Hurghada will resume 7 to 14 days after the date of resumption, which has not yet been announced. The decision to resume flights to the Egyptian resorts ends a hiatus that has lasted since 2015 over a Russian plane crash over Sinai, which killed all 224 people on board. Russia already resumed flights to Cairo in 2018.
Welcome back again. You're still watching us here on the Daily Debate. I'm still joined in with Mr. Tarik Al-Sharif, tourism and hospitality expert. Mr. Tarik, right before we went out to this break, we were talking about the aviation. Now, usually the international tourists that come from anywhere around the world, they're very much interested in packages. So the packages would not just include their accommodation, but also the destination
Right.
or flights. And with this regard, as you've correctly said, the pandemic and the regulations, how are the packages being dealt with despite of this pandemic today?
Well, I think the packages will remain the same way. I mean, as you rightfully said, tourists, especially the beach resorts business, they will always come in charter flights. And it's
But I mean,
a package.
they would be outnumbered, but with the pandemic, would they decrease the numbers?
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, it is expected to have a decreased number. The benchmark will always be the 2010 and then 2019. That was the peak, and we were expecting to get into 2020 with the mega numbers. So, looking back into 2019. I would say that maybe it's going to take us another 2-3 years before we reach that 2019 levels. However, we are seeing and expecting a good increase coming from zero last year. So if we're going into like 30-40% increase, that's dramatic and it's really good. But of course, it will have a negative impact until full flights are back and everybody vaccinated and regulations are taking a bit easy for people to fly. And that is when I think it's going to take another 2-3 years. But this year, we're going to see a big increase compared to last year.
As I've correctly mentioned before the break, we were going to also discuss the tourism, the conference tourism, which was booming in Egypt. We've seen so many conferences during the past couple of years, but of course, with the pandemic in 2020, that shrunk down. As a tourism and hospitality expert, now we see further cooperation that needs to be ongoing with the Ministry of Health if more conferences are ever going to be taking place soon to regulate the vaccination or the PCR tests issues. Any idea of where this is going to be going throughout this year?
Well, I don't have the exact information, but you know, looking into putting this information together, I don't think that conference business is going to come that soon. And the simple reason is that any conference means a gathering of people, you know, and keeping.
We've seen recently many even official conferences have turned virtual, so that's why the whole world is wondering, is that going to be the new norm of going virtual? Or
it is. I mean, I don't know, should I call it fortunate or unfortunate, but you know, I have seen in 2019 where most of the hotels with conference capacities, they were booked to capacity for like 6 months ahead. And now people and the world realize that, you know what, we can do that digital. You know, there is Zoom, there's different applications that people can actually have conferences and seminars. So it is always related to people inside certain walls. So, you know, there will always be capacity issue. There will be always an issue with social distancing when you're coming to conference or an exhibition. And this is why you will find a lot of conferences going virtual in the coming year or two.
The nearest opening that would be taking place or event is the Grand Egyptian Museum, the GEM. It was delayed and postponed, of course, due to the pandemic. Yeah. Again, if you were to give me a general perspective of how this would be most likely run from your experience or your own opinion, how's that going to be? I know it's a bit difficult, sounds like it's an exam here, but but this is an opportunity for me to understand how exactly does this business work, what's happening in the kitchen, when such events are planned to take place, what kind of cooperation, what kind of planning takes place.
Well, of course, something, an event like that, of that magnitude, I mean, it's going to be an international event, and there's no chances to make mistakes. And so I think, I mean, I'm not part of the decision making on that, of course, but I would say that something like that will have to take very high measures. I won't be surprised if there would be a decision maybe to postpone it a little bit. I'm not saying that I know that for a fact, but, you know, because an event like that, there was expected or planned to invite head of states, ministers, prime ministers, and, you know, a lot of celebrities from around the world to have that international touch into that event. And that is the right thing to do, you know. So we will wait and see, but, you know, events like that will always have a challenge, both security, and security here from a real security point of view, securing the access and the entrance, and also security from a health point of view, you know, because of the pandemic. So if pandemic slows down, if the vaccine starts working, there is a lot of if and what if.
So can we say that in this regard, does tourism have impact on other sectors?
Absolutely, absolutely. You can imagine, like, let's say, you know, if you have a family, the father works in tourism business, and he makes some money because of there is tourists. Now the consequences of that money goes into the grocery, it goes into schools, it goes into the car driver. So there is at least 100 people behind that one person that will have an impact. So now, of course, when there is no tourism, no money, and then you start shrinking your expenses, it will have a repercussion on the economy and other industries.
Now, they usually say that the weather in Egypt is absurd, especially that it's hot most of the year. We're entering into the summer season, which extends all the way to October, and that's actually when the season of tourism starts in Egypt. Your expectations, generally speaking, if things continue to be under control, if all of the Ministry of Health, Antiquities and Tourism further cooperate to limit the number of spread of the virus, take into consideration that there will be social responsibility by the people, are we going to be seeing these sectors that are being affected by tourism have lesser burden on them in the upcoming period?
Yeah, yes, if all this happens the right way, definitely, I would love to see that, and I'm very positive about it. The thing is that the social responsibility of the citizens, that's a very key factor and a very key important. Government, associations, organizations have done their part. They have imposed certain things. All rests now with the citizens for the social responsibility. And it is, at the end of the day, it's our economy, it's our bread and butter, and it's our living. So people need to think about it that way.
Frankly speaking, Mr. Tarik, what does the tourism sector need at the moment in order for it to achieve more progress?
We need the COVID to go away.
That's like, that's everybody's wish, even on an individual level.
Well,
That's definitely.
I think, I mean, from technical part, I think the industry in Egypt and those who work in the business, the ministry, the government, and various ministries have done a lot. And it's very highly valued. It is just now that we need the aviation to start working properly and people start flying back. It will take a bit of time, but you know, a lot of people around the world have either lost their jobs or they have reduced salaries. And tourism very much depends on your disposable income.
Of course, definitely.
So there's less disposable income for the tourists to start flying and sparing a couple of $1,000, for instance, to fly to Egypt. The dream is still there. I know that they're still planning to do so, but you know, it needs a full recovery of the economy globally that tourism will start coming back.
What is your vision for the tourism sector in Egypt during this coming stage? Your own vision?
I think, I mean, the way I see it, I think we're going to have a healthy summer. A healthy summer according to the current circumstances. So I'm not comparing to previous years. And gradually, as His Excellency the Minister said, that we are seeing a surge or an increase in the tourism business. It will be slow, but will continue growing. For a full recovery, I think it will take maybe 2 to 3 years. But during these 2 to 3 years, we will be progressing and moving forward.
What is the role of the embassies at the moment, or what should be the role of the embassies at the moment and the media to promote, to help in promoting Egypt and to sort of revive its tourism back? We've seen, of course, the Golden Parade being one very mega event that was echoed. Everybody spoke about it, but that kind of event took years of planning. It's not something that would come and happen every year.
Correct.
Let's speak about the roles of the embassies and the media briefly from your perspective.
Well, I think the media and the embassies, they have an important role because they are actually the people on the ground. And they need to build up on the momentum of what we have right now. I mean, the parade of the mummies is absolutely great event that we need to build on. Hopefully in a few months, they will have the opening of the Grand Museum. That's going to be another international event that we need to build on.
And I also know that there will be another event that will be taking place that's very similar, I believe, to the Golden Parade concerning Tut's collection.
Exactly, I was coming to that.
Yeah.
So that's another, because, and I think it was very smart because King Tut is a celebrity. I mean, he's an icon.
Definitely.
And so that will be an event on its own. But we need to build on the momentum of that. Embassies need to talk to the local media where they are based in. If they are in Germany, they're in Spain, they're in Portugal, wherever they are, they need to talk to the local media. And at time of crisis is the time of media, because this
definitely.
is absolutely, because when you are in good shape, everybody knows you're in a good shape, but you need to talk about yourself when you are in crisis and build up the audience and get them ready whenever you are ready to recover.
Absolutely, I agree. Mr. Tarik Al-Sharif, tourism and hospitality expert, thank you very much for joining me on the Daily Debate.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.
And it's pleasure all mine, and that brings us to the end of the Daily Debates episode this evening. Once again, I'd like to wish all Muslims around the world a very happy feast, and we'll see you again hopefully next Wednesday. Take care.